I want to start with a story. So I want to introduce you. This is my son, Joshua. He looks like a pretty happy guy, right? What you can't tell from this picture, though, is that when Josh was born, he faced a lot of daunting medical situations. His intestines were in 8 pieces. He had 2 holes in his heart, and his right kidney was blocked. We also soon learned after he was born that he had a brain malformation that would impact his development. And that would impact his ability to see, to hear, to speak, and also his ability to use his arms and legs. The truth is, we didn't really know when Josh was born what the road for him was going to be. You know, this is one of my favorite pictures of Josh because this is him in the morning, and this is typical Josh. This is Josh kind of waking up in the morning despite whatever challenges are out there, and this is his kind of face-the-day face. A few years ago, Josh contracted an illness that to you and I, most of us, it would be sort of a common cold, but to him it was life-threatening. And that began a 6-month time period where he experienced a lot of peaks and valleys of recovery. The most scary for us, my wife and I, was an incident when he actually stopped breathing. And we looked on in anguish as a team of doctors worked to resuscitate him. And they did, and he recovered from that for a period of time. But Josh continued to deteriorate, despite the fight that he had and the zest for life that he showed. In the end, we lost him. You know, when I think of Josh, this is how I think of Josh. His wide smile and his eyes that, to me, kind of sparkle like stars in the night. He is and will always be one of my greatest inspirations. So, when you lose a child, there's points of unexpected situations that come flooding over you that you don't anticipate and that you don't realize until they happen. For me, that happened a few months after Josh passed, and I was with a business colleague, and they didn't know about Josh and they didn't know about my story, and they asked me if I had any children. Well, Josh is an only child, so it's an interesting question to try to answer, and not one I ever anticipated. So when they asked me the question, I literally kind of froze, and all this emotion kind of came over me. I didn't really know what to say. So I said no. And after that, and when you realize this is a common question that people ask all the time, I initially just kept saying no, because I just wasn't ready to figure out how to handle that. But over time, it doesn't feel right. I do have a son, and so I started saying yes. And that didn't work well either, because once someone asks you your question, there's all these other questions that start to follow, like how old is he, and where does he go to school? That would lead to me eventually having to say that he passed away. And that's a hard thing to move on from, right? I can't say, yeah, so he passed away. What do you think about the weather we're having? It doesn't really work, does it? So eventually what I figured out how to do is to acknowledge Josh and say yes, but also kind of let people off the hook. So what I would do is say, yes, I have a son. Unfortunately, he was born with some medical conditions, and unfortunately, he passed away. But I don't want to make you feel awkward, but I need to recognize him, and I hope you understand. I also started adding, and if you want to hear more about that, then I'd be happy to talk to you about it at some point. Well, what I found surprised me. About 50% of the time, people would ask with genuine interest more about Josh's story. And as I grew in my courage to talk about it, I wanted to share his inspiration in the hope that other people would find some of the inspiration that I found in him. And then either through volunteering their own story or me asking, people would share their stories with me. And that was such an interesting journey to go through the process of not only making a connection with someone, because what started off as this innocuous question of do you have children, turned into this deep discussion, and we moved beyond this kind of superficial pleasantries of greetings into a real meaningful discussion to get to know each other and make a connection. And so that also helped me from a perspective around my journey of healing, because I was able to share Josh and his life and keep his legacy going. But also, I learned so much from other people's stories as they were telling me, their life experiences. And what I found was the intensity of my story acts as a good invitation for other people to share their own stories and intense stories. And sometimes people would tell me things that they hadn't told many people, or in a few cases, no one else. And so it fosters this level of connection that would have otherwise not happened. And there's so much valuable interactions I've had from those discussions. So the moral of this story is this. In my journey to embrace my story and really grow in my ability to speak about it and kind of accept the situation and share that situation with others, I was reminded of a very important thing, which is the power and value of other people's stories and how those stories not only facilitate a way to connect with someone, but really help us all kind of progress in our ability to appreciate what other people have been through. So the thing is, just as all of you have a story that's really valuable to share, you have to remember that everyone has a story. So your story is an offering that you can give somebody else, and you can share with them your experiences. And other people may give you the gift of their story to share with you as well. And from that, you can create a person-to-person connection. Science actually has something to say about this as well. Neuroscience shows that one of the best ways to transfer ideas between one another is actually the use of sharing stories. Dr. Uri Hassan and his team at Princeton University did some research on this using MRI equipment. And what they did is they actually studied the impact of someone telling a story and somebody listening to a story and what the impact that has on brain activity. And what they found was that actually, if you look at the brain waves of the storyteller and the person listening, they actually move up and down together. And blood flows to the same areas of the brain at the same time through the course of that story. We're actually in sync with the other listener and the storyteller. So the key to this is not just sharing, but listening, and listening with true empathy to kind of get outside of your own internal situation and put yourself in someone else's position. You could kind of think of this like putting yourself in someone else's story. And there's a freedom that comes from kind of getting out of your own story and moving into someone else's and starting to see things from another perspective. So think about that. So think about if you have this type of interaction with, say, 20 people, where you're sharing your experience and someone else is sharing their experience with you, and how that opens up not only your opportunities to inspire people, but all of the learning that you can take in from what other people have experienced. Now, think about if that's 50 people, or 100 people, or 200 people. And think of the impact that has not only on your ability to see the world differently, but how everyone else is going to start to see the world in a different way. So, how can we share our stories? Everyday encounters provide us many opportunities to interact with one another. As those opportunities present themselves, I would offer to you to invite people in. Now, I know that might not be easy. I am an introvert, and so I'm not naturally inclined to engage with people. But here's what I found. The value of the experience is worth a lot more than my own discomfort. Because the reality is, you never know what someone else is going through. And you never know what you can do and what you can say that's going to positively impact somebody else. And you never know when someone else is going to offer you something that's going to mean something to you. So an everyday encounter could lead to a moment that truly matters, whether it's to you or to someone else. So I call those star moments. Now, I mentioned that when I see Josh and I look at his eyes, to me they resemble kind of stars in the night sky. And the definition of a star is a point of light in the darkness. So my wife and I refer to Josh as our special star. And that's what he meant to us, that despite the darkness of his situation and his challenges, his inspiration and his courage and the joy that he had brings light over to the situation that he experienced. So one of the things that I've started to do as I've talked more about Josh with people is to actually hand out stars, like the one I have here and the one that you actually have on your conference pass. And so what I found is that this is a way to not only say thank you for sharing your story, but a small way to memorialize and Josh's inspiration and be a symbol for what he's meant. So what's been interesting as more of these stars have circulated, this has been an opportunity and an invitation for other people to share their stories. See a star, share a story. And if you think about it, there's something even bigger that can take place when you start to think about the exponential sharing that can go on. So that you start to move beyond just making a person-to-person connection with a sense of mutual sharing, and that mutual sharing can lead to a mutual understanding. And isn't that what we need more of, today? I want to show you also really how stars have helped me show what my journey with stories have been. So first off, it really starts with embracing your story. You have something valuable to share, and so I would encourage you to do so. And once you feel ready to do that, talk about your story. Tell other people what you've experienced. Share your experience with other people. Acknowledge the fact that everyone has a story, and there's value that other people can bring as well. Respect the perspective and experiences that other people bring. And finally, make sure that you continue to share. Keep the cycle going. Find opportunities to make connections with people, and find your opportunities to create what I would call star moments. Now, I want to leave you with one final topic, and that is, we are not at the end of our own story. Our journey continues on. Our life journey will continue on. We have not yet written the final chapter in our story. So you have the opportunity to write the next chapter. By sharing and taking in the experiences of others, you can impact the trajectory of your life and then other people's lives, and you never really know who else you're going to impact. I've thought a lot about Josh's legacy. I feel like I've been entrusted with two legacies, mine and Josh's. And quite honestly, sometimes that's really hard for me because I miss him so much. But the thing is, our greatest pains can be our greatest motivators. And I believe that tragedy and adversity can be the author of hope. And so I think that you can find hope at the intersection of where you've been, where you are, and where you want to go. Or in other words, what has been the story of your life that has brought you to this point that you can take in your experiences, you can take in the experiences of others, and use that to move forward and write the next chapter. I heard someone once say, let your life resemble a channel, not a reservoir. A reservoir holds water for storage. A channel releases and distributes it. Let your story be a channel. Share it. Be open when other people's stories flow to you. You have something valuable to offer other people. So what I would say is I encourage you to share. Essentially, be a star. Be a point of light in the darkness. Thank you.